Viburnum plicatum marisii, which is a bit of a mouthful, but boy is it a fantastic plant. It's a shrub, the Japanese snowball, comes from Japan and the Far East, and as well as having these beautiful blossoms, it has a very distinctive format, because you can see that the branches form layers or tiers that carry all the flower on the top side of the branches. So as well as being really strong and flower-filled, it has real elegance. It'll grow in light shade, it'll grow in sun, and in most soils, it's a doer. And if that wasn't enough, in autumn, the foliage develops the richest colours. It goes from red to plum to purple to almost chocolate. It's certainly the strongest colour in the whole garden in October and November. This is one of those plants that I would regard as indispensable. Now, underneath it is this pot, which had tulips in last year and has had nothing since. I couldn't quite decide what to put in it. Well, I have decided, and I'm going to fill it, but not here. There we go. You might have to move, Nige. Coming up on today's show, Mark Lane is exploring how to design with plants, and this week he's sharing his tips on how best to create the perfect woodland garden.
By following a few golden rules, you can create the woodland of your dreams.
Frances is back at the allotment she's sharing in Bristol and seeing how her salad crops and veg are faring.
Allotment life does have its ups and downs, and here we've had our first disaster.
And as we're doing the Chelsea chop, as well as explaining exactly what that means, I'll be trying different versions. Right, I'm ready. The reason I'm really keen to use this pot because I want to plant climbers into here. At the end of March, I sowed Cobea scandens. This is a climber from the tropical areas of America, and it grows really strongly and flowers profusely with bluish, purplish cup and saucer flowers from late summer, round about mid-July onwards, right into autumn until the first frost. It's not highly vigorous. In fact, if you let it, it will grow up to 20 feet tall, so really against a sunny wall or fence. So I'm going to give it something to climb up. And this will tie in with the rest of the wigwams in the garden. And because the pot is big, it can take these bean sticks. There we go. Okay, that's good and firm. Now, Cobea is quite greedy. It does like a fairly rich soil, so all the more reason to add some goodness. And that applies really to any climber. They've got a lot of growing to do in a fairly short space of time. So I'll put one for each of the supports. I will tie those in until they reach about that height, and then they will twine quite happily unsupported. They will give me a really good display up at eye level in the mid-story and on above. But I want colour down around the base of the pot. And because this has got so much goodness in it, and because it's quite big, I can cram this. I can absolutely pack it with colour. I'm starting with a good old ordinary petunia. These are a beautiful, rich colour. They will go on flowering and flowering and flowering all summer long. This is a variety called Sophistica, but just find the colour you want and go with it. Right, on top of the petunias, I also love bidens. And what I love about these bidens is there are a whole range that have marmaladed caramel colours. These oranges touch with yellow, and it works so well here in the jewel garden, and particularly in relationship to the depth of colour of the petunias. I will make sure it's watered once a week. If it's really really hot every other day, and give it a feed of liquid seaweed with its weekly watering. And that's all I have to do. That will look at its very best round about the middle to the end of August, but will keep looking good until the first frost. Now, earlier this year, we started our hunt for really exciting, creative, small gardens. Under the competition, Every Space Counts. We asked you to send in pictures of your garden, with the only proviso being that it must be no more than 6 metres by 6 metres. Now, of course, we finalists. We've shown you the first 4 of the last month, so now it's time to see the 5th and final one.
I'm Zoe. I live just off Brighton seafront. It's normally sunny, but unfortunately not so much today. The garden itself was created in the spring of 2016. To be honest, it got worse before it got better. At one point, this garden was looking like a dump. It was during the flat refurb, and it was just full of rubble bags and a cement mixer, and you name it, it was in this garden. And I remember thinking to myself, how on earth is it ever going to look like a garden? Well, the shape of the garden being sort of long and thin, so it's sort of just over 8 metres long, just over 2 metres wide, with the ridiculously high walls, just lent itself to being an extra room in the flat. The inspiration comes probably from salvage yards. I absolutely love salvage yards, antique shops. You can either find things and put them straight onto the wall, or you can find things, fiddle about with them yourself, make them into something even more beautiful to go on the wall. Now that the garden's finished, there are still challenges, definitely. One of them being watering. There are so many pots everywhere, and hanging baskets and wall baskets, you name it, and it can take an entire evening to water these sometimes. This year's the first time I've tried growing anything from seed. It's some sunflowers. There's 3 of them. They're about this big. But they're growing well, I'm hoping. So, yeah, fingers crossed on that one. As far as cuttings go, I haven't yet, but that's definitely something for next year when I'm feeling more confident as a gardener. I remember when I first came up with the crazy idea of building a fake fireplace in a garden, there were some raised eyebrows around the kitchen table. But actually now it's all done. I'm really pleased with it. I've, made the mosaic tile behind it using some smashed up old tiles that were left over from the flat refurb, and I think it really works. I love acers. I just think they're so beautiful and so delicate. I've got 4 varieties growing in the garden, and I absolutely love them. I also love petunias. I think they're stunning when they come into full bloom. Obviously, not quite in full bloom yet, but I have planted some red and orange ones in the fire pit, and also some blues and purple petunias in the fountain at the end of the garden, just to give the illusion of water cascading out of the waterfall. This garden's really special to me because until a couple of years ago, I could barely keep a houseplant alive. And having created this now, it just brings me such joy to come and be in the garden and have friends over and spend time in the garden. And I'm really proud of it.
Now that you've seen all 5 of our finalists, it's your chance to vote which one you think most successfully makes every space count. And I'll be telling you how you can do that next week. Poor old Box has had a tough time of it over the last decade. Box blight has ripped through the country, certainly ripped through this garden. Sometimes I feel as though Buxus is a plant that we used to grow in our gardens and its days are gone. But it has been so important, so influential in gardens from the 17th century right up to the 21st century. You wanted any kind of formality in a garden, box was the first plant you turned to. This is a variety called Hansworthiensis. These are all taken from cuttings from one set of plants I got about 26 years ago. And its great virtue is it has very large leaves, it's got a very upright growth, and it seems to be, if not resistant to blight, it recovers from it. I didn't clip them for a couple of years because blight tends to attack through wounds. And obviously clipping creates a series of wounds. Tomorrow is Derby Day, and that's a traditional day when you clip box. The key thing I'd say to you is watch the weather. It's been very variable over the last few days here, but the weather forecast is no rain for 3 or 4 days, and that's the time to clip. Now, when you're clipping any box, first of all, use something sharp so the wounds are clean, because otherwise it rips, and then the wounds are much more likely to get infected. And when you're cutting, this is a pyramid that I want to shape. Just follow a plane up. So clip away like that. I'm not cutting too hard. And now, if it's too hard to cut, don't force it. Use a pair of secateurs. The reason why I've got a bucket of water with me is every 5 minutes or so, just dip the blades in water, and that will lubricate them and stop them sticking up, because the box, and it's the same with you, has a kind of stickiness to it, which makes clipping harder. Now, obviously, if you are clipping evergreen shrubs like box or yew or holly, that's great for a formal style of gardening. That's the key to it. But there are lots of ways of making a beautiful garden, be it a Mediterranean garden, a dry garden, a cottage garden. And this week, Mark Lane gives his tips on how to make a really beautiful woodland garden.
As a garden designer, there are some archetypal garden styles that I return to over and over again for inspiration. And today I'm at Fuller's Mill in Suffolk, home to a wonderful example of a woodland garden. Sun-dappled glades combine with luscious beds and borders, and the whole feeling is relaxed and completely enchanting. The gardens were created by Bernard Tickner, who died last year, aged 93. During his lifetime, he transformed an area with poor sandy soil into this tranquil woodland wonderland. Now the 7 acres are in the safe hands and green fingers of head gardener Annie Delbridge. Can you tell me a little bit more about Bernard?
Bernard was in the brewing industry. Horticulture wasn't his first thing at all. He came here to the house. There was a tiny, tiny garden, and over time he acquired more and more land from the Forestry Commission, made it into garden. He was self-taught, and really the more he learnt, the more he wanted to do.
That's incredible. How did Bernard go about designing the garden?
Well, he never actually designed as such as we understand design. He acquired trees, shrubs, sometimes from friends, and he put them in the best spot for that tree. So it's right plant, right place every time.
And then obviously being a woodland, lots of trees, lots of canopies. Are there any limitations from a gardening point of view?
No, there's only challenges. You sometimes find things you don't expect to find in a woodland garden. We've got the silver leaves, the lavenders, the Elaeagnus, the Artemisias, and we've got alliums, great big swathes of them as well. Again, a plant that you associate with big sunny areas, but they're quite happy in the shade as well.
Woodland gardens are prone to dry soil, and then of course you've got the shade to contend with. But don't let that put you off. By following a few golden rules, you can create the woodland of your dreams. This is all about building layers. I see it as a theatre. The trees provide the upper circle with light and shade. And then we come down to the mid-layer, and this is where the smaller trees come in really handy. They create silhouettes and shadows that just dance and bounce off each other, so there's a form of mystery within the woodland. And then we have the understory and the ground cover, and then these wonderful jaws of colour that just pop up and come and go before the canopies get too dark. So we have the bluebells, we have the anemones, and we have the poppies. They're a delight to see. Forget straight lines and go with the flow. Most woodland plants self-seed, so avoid organised lines and opt for more random spacing. And have a deeper blue one and a white one, and they're just flowing seamlessly through this space. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's alive with bees. From a postage stamp to a stately pile, plants are the key to a fantastic design, and they can work on any scale and any budget. Here's my guide for the VIPs, the very important plants, to kickstart your own wooden-style garden. First up, you're looking for height. You could go for a fruit tree, but don't be afraid to try something like acer or an ornamental cherry. Lots of trees come in smaller sizes and create the canopy and dappled shade effect of a woodland. And next up, we're building up those mid-layers. Now, of course, we could go for a beautiful fern, but why not go for something slightly different and go for Telema grandiflora or fringe cup? I love this one because it's a froth of flowers, and if you look closely, they're like tiny dangling bells and still look great even after they've gone to seed. And finally, we're down to the ground cover. Why not go for the swathe of pink dicentra, which will just come out at this time of year, and then to continue the theme, Asarum europaeum offers lovely ground cover with its shiny leaves, which will sparkle in the summer rain. These few plants will give you that instant woodland effect.
Woodland gardens are my own personal favourite, and here at Longmeadow, the copse gives me more pleasure than any other area, I think, but particularly in spring, from mid-February through to the end of June. And now, as we just enter into June, it's still holding on to that lovely, luscious green you get, the light spangling through the leaves, and then the cow parsley still flowering on the fringes, and touches of late bluebells. But above all, it's a feeling. It's this green shade you get everywhere. A lot of us use these things. They're made of plastic, but sooner or later they will become unusable, so you throw them away. And up till now, I've always ordered more. Soil blocks. Now, what soil blocks are, essentially, is you make the inside of a plug without any wrapping whatsoever. Therefore, no plastic. And to make the blocks, you need to buy the soil blockers. That's the sort of standard average one, and you can see it pushes out. They're simply a stamp with a nipple on the end, which creates a hole to put the seed in. That's the basic component. And they get bigger. There's a very useful size, which is this one here, which is what I'm going to use today. The place to get them is online. Just put in soil blockers and you'll find various suppliers. Now you need to mix the mixture in a flat bottom container of some kind, and I'm going to use this truck. The first thing you absolutely must have when you're making soil blocks is something to bind it together. It's 4 parts of coir to 1 part of each of these. This is loam from the garden, really important to add bacteria to the mix, but also because it helps bind it. This is sieved leaf mould. You need some garden compost, that gives it nutrition. And then you need either vermiculite or perlite. Recipes vary. I'm not saying it's perfect, it's just what works for me. And mix it up just like you would a cake mix or a dough. Now, the next magic ingredient, which is water. You need to make this much wetter than you think you do. Essentially, you're making mud. Now, I think by luck, I may have got it about right. You can see that that is actually quite wet. It's certainly not too wet. And if I squeeze it, water should run out. Yeah, it does. It is distinctly wet. So first of all, I put it into a bucket of water, which stops it sticking. Push it into the mix, give it a little twist, squidge it, and go into this. And hope it comes out successfully. Not too bad. Back into the water to clean it off. Give it a little twist. Into the tray. There you go. But you you can see there's an element of trial and error about it, but it hasn't worked too badly. And there are little divots in which to put the seed. And as this dries out, they will come apart slightly, and they'll be very easy to take out. And the important thing is that the consistency, that they will hold together but not become solid concrete lumps. Parsley is one of those crops that you need to sow successively to have a constant supply. So what I do is make 3 sowings a year. Okay. You can put them into anything as long as it's got drainage holes. You don't want them to be sitting in a puddle. And one of the great advantages of them is because they're open, they're air pruned. And that makes a really good compact root ball. These do transplant incredibly well. Now, Frances has wanted to grow vegetables for a long time, but never had the opportunity because she didn't have anywhere to do it. But this year, she managed to share an allotment in Bristol. And this week, she goes back to see how it's faring as spring has progressed through every kind of weather.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Allotment newbie Luke Murray is kindly letting me share part of his allotment in return for helping him get the plot in shape. And I can't believe its transformation since I first came here in March. Luke has been really busy continuing building the raised beds and other bits around the allotment, and I've been planting up my 4 raised beds with things I've been growing in the polytunnels. So I'm really pleased generally with how the allotment's progressing. But allotment life does have its ups and downs, and here we've had our first disaster. Slugs! These slippery customers had a good feasting, decimating our salad crop.
The slugs started appearing and eating him, so I had to channel my kind of inner Jean-Claude Van Damme and kind of came up here, head torch, kind of off an L in hand, and was like, right, I'm going to win this battle. And I'm not.
No. I mean, nighttime attacks are pretty good because that's when they're most active, but yeah, we need to work out what we're going to do to actually protect our
Let's do this properly, is that what you're saying, yeah?
If you have an integrated approach where you're kind of preventing the slugs from coming, but then also having controls down that if they do come, hopefully things will be less damaged.
Okay.
You can use physical barriers is one way of stopping them from getting to the plants, or you can use kind of chemicals, pellets and stuff.
I'm really anti putting any chemicals into my soil and kind of the surrounding areas, so I'm getting my housemates collecting eggshells like there's no tomorrow, so I'm going to try and put those down to give a bit of kind of roughage, stop the slugs coming on there. I've kind of looked into beers traps a little bit, but I'm just totally open for ideas that you've got, really, that you can bring to the party.
Well, I agree with you about that, the chemicals. I mean, pellets and stuff, they work well, but I personally don't really ever use them. I think if we have a little experiment and see maybe what works better than other things, and by the end of the year we'll know what to do next year.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I feel like there might be a little competition within this.
Oh, potentially.
See who can keep the most slugs at bay.
You have that end.
Yeah.
I'll start.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Cheers.
Slugs are such a pain. All different approaches combined together just to put them off and make the problem as minimal as you can. What I'm going to use is something I've used before on things like dahlias, and it's sheep's wool pellets. Thin layer on the soil is all you need. It's just the feeling of the wool on their stomachs. They don't like it and they won't cross it. And once it's watered, that will expand. And the nice thing about using something like this is that it will break down and actually feed the compost for future years as well, which is always a nice bonus. So we'll have to wait and see how our slug defences fare. But things are looking much more positive in the communal polytunnel. Last time I was here, it was quite bare and the plants weren't really doing anything, but what a difference a month makes. So lush, and there's always people here kind of swapping plants and stuff. It's really nice. With the winter months behind us, it's now peak time for planting out. But some plants need more attention than others, including my sweet corn. When you're planting sweet corn, it needs quite a nice rich soil. So there's plenty of manure and compost in here. It should be absolutely fine. But if you haven't got any, then maybe just add a little bit more feed to it. And normally you'd put them about 45 centimetres apart, but we have quite a small plot here and we're limited for space. Just make sure you harden it off a little bit before you stick it straight outside, because the nights can still be cold, even if they're not frosty. Normally when you plant vegetables, you put them in rows, and that's how you can hoe in between them. With sweet corn, I'm doing a whole grid, and the reason for that is because they're wind pollinated. So you need a breeze to flow in between them and maximise your yield. If there is not enough airflow in between the plants, then you won't get any cobs forming. While I've been planting, Luke has been busy prepping the next allotment project. Hi, Luke.
Hey, Francis.
I love this bench, it's so good.
Thank
What's
you.
your plans for it as it goes on?
So it's going to be like a herb and tea bed. So get all the weeds out and plant a load of amazing smelling and tasting things in here.
That sounds like a really good plan.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that I can kind of, fill all these different pockets with different types of soil so I can grow a real variety of stuff and sit down on my bench with a cup of hot water, pick all my teas, look out my plot, and have a bit of a rest.
Ace. Do you know what? We're getting there. It won't be long. We'll be sitting here with a cup of tea, relaxing.
Well, I feel like we've earned a few in the bank already.
I think so. It's coming on, isn't it? I'm really beginning to get to know people here on the allotment. And the thing I love about this site is that you never know what you're going to find from one day to the next. Rachel and Adam, known to his friends as Chicken, have been here for the last 3 years and created their very own little oasis. What was here when you first kind of got here?
It's pretty much just a flat piece of clay, soil, no raised beds, lots of bean stakes.
You must have had quite a vision then to sort of turn it into this.
It all happens when you get stuff. You acquire a bit of decking,
Oh, wow, they're so cool. Do you use the chickens for kind of fertiliser, the manure and stuff like that? I mean, do they help around the plot?
In winter, you can put the chickens on the beds. They will rip out all the weeds, eat all the weed seeds, eat all the slugs. So they're doing a job for you. You don't have to feed them as much because they're doing that. You add the bonus of eggs.
So you can use the shells as well to keep the slugs
Keep
off
the
the beds.
slugs away.
We're having a bit of slug trouble
Oh,
on
yeah.
our plot.
A lot of
getting
slug
munched.
troubles.
Well, we've got frogs in the pond, so they're like our little army. Like this morning we found 2 slow worms, didn't we? as
Yeah, we
well?
found 2 slow worms. They were
That's their
hunting for
favourite thing,
slugs.
slugs. I think humans always try and shape nature to do what they want it to do, but actually if you just sit back and watch nature, then there's always something that comes along to eat whatever you don't want there.
Yeah. We have a no-dig policy on our plot, but it's much, much smaller and it's just sort of little raised beds. So it's kind of veterans of permaculture. Do you have any advice?
I'd say you want to start off stopping the weeds, so cardboard's a great help with that. Layer it up, and on top of that, put on whatever you can. I'm lucky to get a lot of hops, manure and straw from the farm and the local breweries. The council drop the leaves off in the oven, so we've got a lot of good inputs there that adds a good humus to the soil.
The worms will pull down all the leaves into the soil and hopefully the clay will start to change.
So basically, wait, keep layering, and eventually it will get there.
Yeah.
We've got time.
It's great to see what people can do with their allotment spaces, and actually, in not that long a time at all, the sky is the limit, and it's very inspiring.
Francis is discovering what everybody who grows vegetables has to deal with all the time. And that is that you've always got problems with slugs and snails. But it is worth getting them into context. A healthy crop like this chard is never going to be ripped into by slugs and snails. You get the odd hole. That's not a problem and therefore not worth worrying about or spending time. It's young plants that they like. That's where to put your attention. Now, coming up, we visit a garden just outside Birmingham, which you might call Caribbean woodland. And I take stock of the fruit trees that I planted last autumn in pots. This Easter, I tried a little bit of an experiment. I sowed some first early potatoes, Casablanca, in 3 different types of container. 2 potatoes, same size and exactly the same growing medium. A recycled pot which uses plastics, but was the first of its type. It's good to see, and 1 in a plastic bag. Now you can see straight away there's a big difference. The 2 seed potatoes in a plastic pot couldn't be healthier. They're growing really well. The one in the recycled bag, there is only 1 growing, and the one in the plastic bag, there's 1 really pathetic attempt. When I put my hand in there, that is cold. It's actively cold to touch, and I think this is the root of the problem. However, just because you've got a lot of top growth, it doesn't mean to say you're going to have a bigger harvest of potatoes, and it doesn't mean to say that what has survived in these 2 won't catch up, so we'll persevere with them. The next thing to do to ensure that they grow well is to earth them up. Now, when you earth up, you're doing 2 things. You're protecting the top growth from frost, which for most of the country is increasingly unlikely now. And also you're protecting any potatoes from getting exposed to light, because that's when they turn green and then they become poisonous and you shouldn't eat them. So earthing up simply means putting earth, or compost in this case, the same compost in all of them, around the growing stems. Don't worry if it goes over the leaves, won't hurt them at all. So just go like that. So earth them up, keep them watered, and we'll come back to them nearer harvest time. Now we've asked you to contact us if you've got any problems in the garden that you think we could help you with. And we had a letter from Dawn Parsley in the Wirral, who when she was digging in the garden had a very unusual discovery, which she didn't quite know how to deal with. So we sent Nick along to give a hand.
Wow. So this was completely submerged in shrubs?
Rhododendron bushes completely over it, all over it. Came down, then just cleared it and found this formation of beautiful 14 steps in a gorgeous curve down.
So it was almost like being an archaeologist.
It's like an archaeology dig.
After months of digging and clearing, Dawn uncovered this spectacular undulating bedrock with graffiti etched into the stone going back to the 1940s.
It was a privilege, really, Nick, to sort of
what a lovely
do
thing.
it.
It's an extraordinary feature, and I know you want to make something of it. So.
Well, I think at the moment we've got this beautiful, but it's quite dull, and I think it kind of like needs the right plants that will live on it and enhance it.
Dawn's rocky steps are refined, and the key to successfully planting around them in any kind of bedrock is to work with a shallow sandy soil. So I'm going to help Dawn plant up a small part of the bedrock so she can get lots of ideas of what to do in the rest of the area.
So Dawn, the first thing we need to do is to get these structural plants into the ground.
I've chosen Cistus colbariensis for its beautiful white tissue-like early summer flowers. Lavendula imperial gem for its silvery foliage, scent, long flowering. And Stipa tenuissima for its contrasting delicate foliage.
You know, it's always worth, with any planting you're doing, wherever it is, just stepping back to get that overview.
Yeah.
The vital thing, Dawn, to make sure all of these plants are really happy is to get the ideal kind of Mediterranean soil mix. Now, you're really lucky here because you've got this wonderful kind of sandy soil, so it's a really good start. So what I want to add to that and add into the crevices is this mix I've made up. It's about 50-50 of a peat-free compost and then horticultural grit. Always do your firming round the sides. Especially important with these sort of Mediterranean plants. You don't want to bury any of the stem or any of the foliage because it will cause it to rot away.
Now we've placed the key structural plants, Dawn and I are going to set out the crevice and trailing species. Crevice plants are perfect for those tiny little gaps, and the trailing plants will beautifully cascade over the rocks.
I think the first thing to get into the ground is going to be these thymes. What's brilliant about these is they make perfect little ground cover. What'll be lovely here is you walk up the steps, these will just creep over and you'll end up sort of stepping on the edges of them and getting some lovely kind of Mediterranean scent. Next plant I want to introduce to you is it's a real Mediterranean stalwart, and it's commonly known as the sun rose or the rock rose. And it'll flower right the way through to July.
So, the next plant I'd like to get in is this. Now it's called Cerastium, or snow in summer. It's a real favourite of mine. It's brilliant for rock gardens. The thing that makes it special is that it trails, so it will make its way across the rocks. And the reason it's called snow in summer is across the top of all of this silver foliage you get this wonderful dusting of white star flowers for several months through summer. start to make their way down across these rocks, and they'll love the heat coming from the rock, and we'll just fill in all these gaps really nicely. You know, I really love this plant. Its common name is house leek, or sempervivum is the botanic name. What's great about it is it hardly has any root, so it'll go in these smallest of crevices that you've got. And what you can see is these little babies, which will slowly spread out, but you can also nick off individual ones like this.
Plant them out.
Leave them on a rock for about 48 hours and they'll dry out, but if you then put that into damp soil, it will root and start to grow.
Oh, right.
So you can get them into the tiniest little crevices. So I think this little chap is going to go very nicely here.
Oh, it's like one lovely flower raised to the sun, isn't it?
Yeah.
To give a real sense of the plants inhabiting the space, I'm introducing a variety of trailing species. Prostrate rosemary will provide aromatic scent and pour over the edge of the rocks. Cotula will provide interesting ground cover, and its dainty flowers will go right through to midsummer. And Euphorbia mycinites will sit happily on the rock surface and trickle over the sides in a beautiful cascade.
Do you know what? I think we're finished.
I think it looks fab.
Let's come back and have a look. This is just a taster, of course.
Yeah.
Do you feel confident enough now that you can take this theme, this style of plants, and replicate it across the rock and link it all together?
I will. I'll keep the same theme going, I think, because then the colours will come and they'll match and they'll balance. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, you're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
It never fails to surprise and delight me the way that plants can find a home in the least likely of situations. However, my apricots have not wanted to make a home here. They've died on me. We had that very sharp frost in December, -14, and I keep referring to it, but it was cataclysmic. And that damaged the plant. It was followed by cold, wet weather, and it's caused bacterial canker. Now, this is a disease that the prune family can get plums, gauges, cherries, apricots, and that you notice it as much as anything else by this gummy ooze that comes from lesions on the bark, on the trunk, and on the stems. And on a healthy tree, it could be just a sign of damage, and as long as you prune it out completely, it won't necessarily kill the tree. But this poor little tree never had a chance and has died. So, let's take this out. And in its place, I'm not going to put another member of the prunus family, but a pair of olives. You can see that it's got very good drainage, which is great for olives. But there's one feature which I didn't add to this, which I think will improve chance of an olive, and that's loam. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that out. Not too much. And then top it up. Now this is loam. It may look just like normal soil, but actually this is from my turf stack. And loam is essentially soil with a very high organic content. It adds bacteria and fungi and living organisms to what can be a little bit of an inert growing material. Don't worry too much if you haven't got a turf stack. Most people haven't. If you can find a peat-free, loam-based compost and add plenty of grit to the mix. Mix it in, and you don't need to be too specific about it because the roots are going to access it, and that now will please the olive a great deal, I hope. I'm a late comer to olives. I used to think it was pointless growing them here because of our climate. Too wet, too cold, too miserable. Keep them to where they're happy, which is fundamentally the Mediterranean. Well, I'm very wrong, and I'm sure that many of you watching in the warmer parts of this country will have been growing olives for years. But this is a first time for Longmeadow, and it's a symptom both of climate change and also adaptability. They're quite hardy. Olives can survive down to -10, but don't bet on it. Protect them if possible, and they will grow perfectly well in a pot, as long as you can move them. Needs to just slip onion. We'll take that out there, and it's a very nice root system. Now, the next stage is to prune it. Olives fruit on last season's growth. So anything I cut off that regrows won't bear any fruit. But we do want to get a nice shape, and this is growing very upright, and really I want a pom-pom. So that's the width there. So I don't want the height to be any more than the width. So if I just take these off, like that, and the best time to do this, in principle, is early spring, late winter. But I won't do it as a regeneration. So don't worry too much if you cut off where you shouldn't do, or you take off a little bit too much. It will reform, but we want to try and get it as right as we can. I will water these in well and give them a weekly soak with a weekly feed, and they should be fed through till late summer. And if you can lift the pot and you have space, they will be much happier if you bring them indoors in winter, but don't bring them into the house. That'll be too warm and too humid. Somewhere cool, but not freezing. Right, well, that's the start of something new, and this is the sad end of something old. A failure, but I've learned something. "17 years ago, Joe Manchester moved to his house south of Birmingham in Worcestershire. Now, the garden was unremarkable, but over the years, he has transformed it into something special. And I think perhaps you could best describe it as a woodland garden, but with a twist.
I love plants. I just can't help myself. It's like a kid in a sweet shop. I love going to the garden shows and find the most unusual plants that people, when you go to a normal garden, you don't find. When we first came here, most of the garden was just trees and different shrubs. So I twisted it, put a different feel on it. This is what I call my hidden garden. What I wanted down here is to look tropical and also woodland as well at the same time, which is very difficult to do, but hopefully I've managed it. Today I'm getting things ready because I opened for the NGS, so the garden's got to be on top 4. I originally came from a little Caribbean island called Nevis. I originally came to England in 1967. My dad came first. He was a keen gardener, then followed by my mum. I got 2 other brothers. When we were young little kids, my dad used to stand us aside and said, "Look, this plant does this does this." And my dad was a keen, he loved dahlias and chrysanths. And by the time we was about 10, we knew every little chrysanth's name, every little dahlia's name. When my mum died of breast cancer, I thought, well, how can I give something back? Because my mum was always had a beautiful smile on her face. And the only thing I knew was gardening. So I opened a garden for a local hospice to raise money for them. For the Children's Hospital, I did Alice in Wonderland theme. Hence, you can see the clocks up in the tree, the big mushrooms, got little rabbits up the back, things like that. I even got a little wishing chair at the top. Half an hour, forget all that they're going through. I will put in the garden, I've got beautiful leaves, I've got the hostas, I've got the ferns, I've got the ligularas, all got loads of different things, and I just love how they match together. I love the Caribbean feel, and I want a bit of sunshine back into the garden. That's why I go for all these different leaf shades. The podophyllums are really weird in the sense, it always reminds me of a frog's back. Just look at the top of it. Just brilliant. This garden I will call a really high maintenance. Not many people will take this on, but I just love the challenge. I normally work in this garden, call it 7 days a week. I'll normally put in at least 4 hours every single day. When I put my bananas in the conservatory, it gets attacked by green fly. So what I have to do, first of all, wash all the green fly off. In every spring, I always mulch the ground first because it just gives a shine to the leaves. Well, in this part, I've got loads of different variety of gingers. After a while, you get a beautiful flower head on here, which normally it's around, I would say, over Christmas time. Before I bring them out here, and I'll just snip it off. As you can see, it doesn't die back at all. It just stays the same, and it grows like this. To propagate it, I'll break it off like this, and I'll fit it beautifully into there. Normally when I put that in, it's going to be the same depth that I've taken out. If it goes in too deep, what will happen is, because of the water, it'll start rising up and rot the bottom of it, and the roots won't take. Most of the plants in this garden are hostas. I just think they're an absolutely wonderful plant. Each one's got different leaf, different texture. Two of my favourite plants in this garden. First one I got there, hosta white feather. Beautiful, beautiful white feather in the spring, and then come the winter, near the winter, it changed to green. The other one I love down the back there is Chinese sunrise. It's got beautiful colour on it, just reminds me of the Caribbean. I normally knock them out, started every year. In here, this pot here, horse compost, well rotted, doesn't even smell. Absolutely beautiful. Now I'll measure for size. Perfect. Now normally, I put gravel on the top of it. That does two things. One, it will stop the weeds, and two, it stops some slugs as well. Now, there's another little trick that I'll use. I heard this story from a little old lady one time. Now, when I met this lady, she told me about the garlic. Best thing to do, she said, just boil it up, put it in a spray can, put it under the leaves. May not work for some people, but for me it does. As you can see, I've got no problems. All different hostas, none of them. When I sit in this garden, I forget about all my troubles, everything. So it's like I've opened the door, I've come in, and what I've done on the other side stops, and my garden just enlightens me. I just love it, and I love giving something back to people. When I originally set this garden up, I thought if one person smiles when they come through the door, it's worthwhile to me.
Joe's Garden is open by appointment till the end of August. But this weekend, the National Gardeners Scheme has over 300 gardens open across England and Wales. The details of where they are and what time they're open can be found on our website. But there's bound to be at least one garden near you, and I do urge you, if you've got time, to go and visit as many as you can. Because seeing gardens of all kinds and of all sizes is the best way to get inspiration, to get new ideas and to learn something, and is always really good fun. You may often have heard the expression the Chelsea chop. And it gets its name because it's done absolutely at this time of year, around the time of Chelsea Flower Show. But a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that it's a tidying process. But that is not what the Chelsea chop means. The Chelsea chop is actually about pruning late flowering perennials to control the rate of their growth, the timing of their flowers, and different heights. So if you have a plant like this is Lysimachia ciliata firecracker. It's got this dramatic purple leaf and then has tiny but very vivid yellow flowers. Now all this clump is going to grow up and flower about this height towards the end of July, beginning of August. But if I cut some of it back, I give it the Chelsea chop, and cut it back by at least a third and as much as a half. So if I go like this and just cut across like that, that's going to do a number of things. First of all, it's going to stimulate side shoots, so it's going to be bushier. Secondly, this is going to flower later than the one behind, which gives me successional flowering. So rather than just one display, it'll stagger it for longer. And thirdly, this won't grow so tall, so that we'll have just a little bit more structure and range within a border. This is an Aster umbellata. I love it. It's got tiny little white flowers, which keep on coming from July right through into autumn. I've divided it this spring, taken half and used to bring in tree dahlias and other tender plants, which will be ready to go out next week when the nights have warmed up a bit. Now, this does form a kind of solid mass flanking the path. What I can use the Chelsea chop for is to slightly rake it back, so it's taller at the back than the front without losing any flowers.
So if I cut here, making sure I don't cut these lovely self-sown aquiledias that pop up all over the garden. And so I just cut in here like this, in the front. I'm not going to forfeit any flowers at all. They will just come a little bit later and remain a little bit lower. And so you can see that the whole thing is on a slope going back up. And that will just give it a little bit more of a dimension and structure. Now you can use this in all kinds of ways, but just remember that you don't do it to anything that has already got flowers or buds on. These are only for plants that are yet to form their flowers. Now, it's a good job to do now, around the next week or two, but here are some others you can do this weekend. Now is a good time to sow biennials like wallflowers for flowering next year. And a good way to save plastic is to do this direct into the ground, into a seed bed made in a bare corner. Prepare the ground well and rake it to a fine tilth. Draw a shallow drill and sow the seed thinly along it. Cover them over and water them well. If, like me, you planted trees, hedges, or even shrubs in the winter, don't forget to water them well and give them a good soak every week for the rest of the summer. And this will set them up for life. If you've grown peppers and chilies, now is the time to pot them on into their final pot, and ideally a good-looking terracotta one. If you haven't sown your own seed, don't worry, because you can buy plants from garden centres. And these also can be potted on into a well-drained compost, and then put them somewhere bright and warm. Well, there's a few bits and pieces to do over the weekend, nothing too arduous. And here we are. It's summer, it's June. And always at Longmeadow, the shift is spelt out by the jewel garden. These extraordinary purple sensationaliums, which are just getting going. Coupled with the intensity of the orange of the euphorbia, it just gets richer and richer now, right through into autumn. I'll be back here at Longmeadow next week, and also we have the RHS Chatsworth show, and we'll be covering that as well on Gardeners'World. And on top of that, we have a full 1 hour extra programme from Chatsworth, which will be going out at 7 o'clock on BBC Two on Thursday night. So, summer, Longmeadow and Chatsworth, all coming next week. See you then. Bye-bye. Good girl. Come on.